underestimate
the power
of a single
Conversation.
it could change your whole life.
INCRadio Chatline.
conversations that matter.
Hello to everyone who's tuning into INC Radio Chatline, the place where we have conversations that matter. I'm Tony Rose Valenzuela, broadcasting from Sterling Heights, Michigan today, and super glad to be with you because it is a very special week. A lot of things going on, and it's good to be on INC Radio and good to share our stories, and not just my stories, of course, but I also have my co-host, my friend with me here in the Hangout. Let's say hi to him all the way over there in Rockford. What's up, BJ?
Hello everyone. Thank you for joining us again in another episode of INCRadio Challenge. Also, I'm Chris here live from Rockford, Illinois.
Yeah, when you hear Rockford, you don't automatically think Illinois. So thanks for adding the Illinois part. I don't think I added the Illinois part earlier. Yeah, he's in Illinois.
Well, what comes to mind when you what comes to mind when you say Rockford?
When I hear Rockford, I was thinking of like mountains. like Rocky Mountains somewhere in like Colorado, right?
I can see that. You kind of think of like more naturey kind of.
And not naturey. There's something just like strong, right? Something a little bit like strong, kind of like Rockford, right? Like a little bit like powerful. Like I don't know. That's just what I think about. But I'm excited to be here because, and I'm glad that you're here with me too, because last week I know that we did talk a little bit about this topic that we have for today, which is a continuation, basically about developing habits. Now I wasn't there for the talk last week, so EJ is here to also help supplement a little bit, maybe give us a quick little recap of things that was discussed, maybe, so that those who didn't get to watch the show, they can be able to be a little bit caught up. But for at least today, we're moving on from the part of the initial developing habits and also dealing with how to embrace change. So I hope that was enough time to give you, EJ, to kind of to recall back, because I know a week ago is a long time ago. But but I guess, what was your one takeaway from the talk that you guys had last week in terms of developing habits? If you had one good takeaway.
I mean, if anything, I would say it's like everyone kind of struggles differently with like in terms of like developing. I know developing kind of just sounds like building habits, but even breaking habits. I realized that um, a lot of people struggle with breaking habits as well. Actually, I'd say a lot of people, but that's me as well. I also struggle with breaking habits. I would say I find it harder to break a habit than it is to build one. For me, building a habit usually is just, I decide, okay, I'm gonna, like let's say I wanna learn something new. Like, okay, I'm gonna start learning about it, and, until it becomes a habit. But breaking a habit has been harder for me, I would say.
Interesting. Okay, so that kind of plays into the top level part to this before we do the real deep dive. But um, just thinking about that, right? Just thinking about how everybody develops habits or picks up habits differently, right? We all have different ways that we kind of go about it. Maybe some are more direct or more they're ready to jump in and they can handle, developing a habit, and some might take some time, and then the vice versa of that in terms of breaking habits, that's also another facet on its own. But with all of those different things, we experience feelings about them, right? We experience feelings about them. We have thoughts about them, kind of trying to figure out, like, I guess maybe reconcile what you want to do versus like what you're feeling and what when you're thinking at that moment. And I guess the easiest example that I can think of, because when I think of habits, typically you think of stuff that you do on a daily basis that are more like hobby based, or maybe like in terms of exercise, right? You have people who like to go to the gym, who are gym rats. Have you
Something
ever
you do
had
for
it?
fun, kind of. I guess.
Sorry.
Something you do for fun, I guess.
Yeah, possibly. Like that's maybe that's the one way that we can kind of introduce it, right? This idea of how we feel sometimes when, let's say, you have these things that you do habitually that you typically enjoy, but
Mm-hmm.
then once you've gone in, let's say about like 3 or 4 weeks, or maybe even like 2 months. Let's give it more time. Maybe like let's say 2 months in, you're into it and you're like, oh, this doesn't feel, as good as it did in the beginning, or this doesn't feel as fun as it did. It doesn't feel the same. Has that ever happened to you, EJ, where you picked up something and then X amount of days or X amount of weeks later, you're like, oh, this is not what I thought it was.
Actually, mine's more like it goes deeper than just a few and just a few months. Because I think I've been like for me it's drawing. I've been drawing for I would say since I was again even before I went to school. I've been I've been drawing. It's been like one of like my yeah, my mom's there in the live chat. You can ask her about it. I have been drawing for the longest time, and there were times where I did get scolded because I drew on my school notebook when I was a kid. But yeah, like drawing's been something that I really love to especially like when I was younger. It's something that I would use like whatever like free time that I could find. If
Mhm.
I'm not playing outside, I'm probably drawing on my notebook on scrap pieces of paper. That I find. It's been like one of like I would say my biggest hobbies that I've had. But I think ever since because when we went here when we went here when we first got transferred here in the states, when we first moved here, um, I had to throw away. I had to throw
Aw.
away all of my drawings, all of my notebooks, all of my notebooks. I had them all in uh, a folder. I did entrust them to a friend, but I don't know if he still has them or not. But like all of my notebooks, all of like my drawings that I had, I put them all in like this one. Not, it wasn't a folder. I forgot what you call those things. Uh, but like I handed it to him. I don't know if he still kept it, but like losing all of like all my drawings. I
Your
love
progress.
I love drawing comics. Especially I would make my own comics. Like having to basically throw away like all of those. When I got here in the states, like I tried to draw and like I would say a little. I still get a little bit inspired from time to time where I will draw, but it's not the same as before. And it's not the same as
Hmm.
before. I'm like more so like even now, especially I find it more difficult to draw. Like I would get started on a drawing, but I never finish my drawings. If you look at my sketchbook, it's all unfinished drawings. Sometimes it's just outlines. It's just outlines, and I never got to. I never get to finishing them because like I don't know, it just doesn't feel as exciting anymore. I wonder if I wonder if like having to throw away like all of my drawings affected how I felt about it. Because like I said, it's the progress that I made, and it's drawings that I've had it's drawings that I've had since I was a kid.
Mm. That makes me sad for you, EJ, because then I know you're pretty artistic, and I have friends who are like that as well, and that can be discouraging, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely one of the things that I think can happen to a lot of people when they're doing hobbies or when they feel like they've hit a wall. And you're like, I don't know where to take this. Like, I don't know where to go from here anymore. And you lose that momentum, right? You kind of lose that momentum because you're like, you go into this thing and you're excited because you're thinking about all the potential and all this stuff that you have planned, and
Mm-hmm.
then something happens, you get that kind of friction or that pushback, and then you get deflated a bit and you lose that momentum.
Actually, that's another thing you mentioned. like hitting a wall. Like I feel like in terms of like skill, I've just hit a wall. Like where like how I don't know how good I am at drawing. Because when I was a kid, that's what my family knows me for, like drawing,
Okay.
making comics. Like that's like every time they needed something drawn, they're like, "Oh, call EJ. He knows he knows how to draw," and they'll ask you to. I know. So like like my parents really really encouraged that hobby like when I was younger. But like yeah, I did like as I was growing up, it became a bigger and bigger concern that I wasn't like improving as much as I
Mm.
wanted to in the yeah, in the hobby. And even more now, I would say I'm not I'm not as satisfied with my drawings.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of something similar where I kind of lost motivation. Because music is, I know everyone really associates music with me, and that's always been something that's constant in my life. So in terms of other stuff, I feel like it's one of those hobbies that you kind of, oh, I'll try that out, and then just loses its like, you know, when you open a bottle of pop and it's like and just like
The fizz.
it just it fizzes out. Yeah, that's the word. It just fizzes out. I feel like a lot of the hobbies that I kind of get into, in order for it to really become a habit, I have to be incredibly engaged. If I'm not engaged or challenged in the way that maybe it's about expectations, I guess, in terms of expectations of that hobby of whatever it is that I'm doing, like, you know, habitually, or whatever habit I'm trying to create for myself. If I don't feel that challenge, maybe that's the reason why working out is a challenge, because there's no one to challenge me. If there's somebody to challenge me, maybe that would motivate me. Maybe that's what my
After this, I'll challenge you to something. I'll challenge you to something. Para that working out becomes challenging for you.
Yeah, I feel like but that's just for me personally, right? And everybody's different. Everybody kind of it has different responses or different reactions in the way that maybe they may lose motivation, or the way that they feel towards these different hobbies. Now, the reason why we kind of brought this up is because, you know, it's not just hobbies or activities that we do, but sometimes things can happen in our life that can shake up your whole routine, right? Like your whole way of lifestyle that you're used to. Could be very extreme reasons, or, you know, very basic normal reasons that happen. Like, let's say at work, you typically have this schedule of, you know, you work 8 to, let's say, 8 to 4 every day, and then all of a sudden you have to start working like 2 more extra hours at work, so you're working now until 6. And that's just one example of how, what your typical routine, or something that you're used to, right? Something that you're used to, that you could say is an established habit. In a way, it gets kind of affected by different circumstances. Have you experienced something like that, EJ, where you didn't really know what to do after your routine was disrupted?
Oh, like all the time. That's me. Like when that's me when there's like changes in like my. I'm very I know. I notice I stick to my schedule very strictly. I noticed that myself. Like maybe not I know not physically but emotionally. I stick to my schedule very I know very strictly. Like even when let's say we're going like let's say we're going on a road trip like they say okay let's convene around 8 a.m. and then we'll I know we'll convoy we'll carpool around 8:30. We have to leave around 8:30 so we get there early. Like if we're like let's say even an hour late. I think the longest I've experienced was like 2 hours late. I was really upset. I was really upset about I was like, why aren't they here yet? They said 8. It's already 8:15. It's already 8:30. Like I constantly check. I constantly check the window to see are they there yet? Are they here yet? like I noticed that I'm very like I stick to the schedule very strictly.
Got
Like
it. Okay.
so like little changes to I know to like my routine, it upsets me for the first, I would say, for the first few weeks.
Few
It'll
weeks. Okay.
yeah, weeks. It takes me weeks to I know, like especially if it's something that'll be like constant in my schedule. If it's something that's just, let's say it's just like a one-time thing, like I mentioned, a road trip. It's a rare occasion to happen. Like it only upsets me for a little bit, but like things that'll change, basically my routine, my daily routine. Like you said, you add 2 hours to your your job. Like to
Hmm.
me, that's like 2 hours of relaxation uh that I have to remove from my schedule. Like if I get home from work, like I get home from work and I'm like, okay, I have 2 hours to relax before I have to before I have to do my other responsibilities. That's
Right.
like those 2 hours that you had to relax before. It's not okay. I have to go from work, and then the next responsibility that I have. Uh, it's like I would feel like that something like that would upset me for at weeks, at least, until I find a way to either get that 2 hours from somewhere else,
Hmm.
or uh, I just become used to it. I just become used to it at some point. But for me, it's I know. For me, it's that.
Okay, time. I feel like time could be something that relates to everything. I don't know how everyone there in the live chat feels, but you're welcome to share your thoughts with us on today's topic. If you're just popping in, we're talking now about, you know, we typically have our schedules, right? We have our schedules. We have these things that we do daily that we're just used to, right? And then some things, multiple, sometimes multiple things will happen, right? That kind of throw you for a loop, as they would say. I guess the one thing that resonates in terms of what you've already mentioned, EJ, is when you have set responsibilities to take care of, let's say at work,
Mm.
and then all of a sudden there's this sudden project that that takes precedence over everything else that you're supposed to do that day, and you're like, okay. And you have to be okay with it because that's your job. And you're basically the one, like, no one else can be entrusted to do that, like that's specifically for you, and you're like, okay, I guess we're doing this, and then the other stuff just has to be pushed because it's in terms of like priority, right? Because
Yeah,
sometimes there's varying
more
priorities.
urgent, more
Yeah,
yeah,
more urgent, more just because of deadlines. For you have your deadlines, and then other people have their deadlines.
yeah.
So that's the stuff that kind of stresses me out because as I'm working on that new thing, I'm thinking about all the other things that I have left behind that I have left behind. Like, it's like, that saying of having stuff on the back burner in your mind? It's
Mm.
literally that. I feel it so much. The best way that I can describe it is like you're trying to cook eggs. You're trying to fry an egg in a frying pan, but you know that you have like boiling pasta in the back burner, and then you have like the boiling or frying fish. That if you leave it too long, it's gonna smell and it's gonna burn it.
Like oh wait, like I need to time like
Yeah, I
like
need
how
to
much
time.
time is
Yeah.
before I need to flip the fish. I need to take out the pasta from the water.
Yeah, it's like I can't leave that alone for too long. Like I need to get back to that at some point. So that's the stuff that kind of the feeling, I guess because we're talking about the feelings that we get from it. I get flustered. I get flustered, and sometimes I don't want to say paralyzed because I do eventually act, but I do have moments of where I'm like, you freeze a little bit, right? You're like, I don't know what to do with this. And it just reminds me of that idea of being, I guess, adaptable, right? Adaptability, being able to kind of take these set things that we have and then kind of work through it, even though you're feeling these different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I can think of is maybe, you have this routine of, you typically see your friend, at this time of week. You're used to you guys going out. You're used to you guys having that, maybe you go for bubble tea or for coffee, and
Mm-hmm.
then for X amount of weeks, it keeps falling off. Like it doesn't happen anymore. You're like, what's going on? And like, we know life happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of accept that, because we we
And of
don't.
course, you find out the reason
Yeah, you eventually find out the reasons, and sometimes even if you don't, we just understand that our friends are busy, right? But it's sometimes that kind of stuff, right? That kind of stuff that maybe you're attached to, or things that are important to you, where those feelings can be a little bit more, yes, amplified in terms of your reaction of what you typically expect to happen, that just doesn't end up happening that way,
Mhm.
right?
It's
Um,
no, like that situation specifically. I feel like it would make me like really sad, especially if we've had this this schedule. Oh yeah, we see each other for um sorry, we see each other. I felt like I had a sneeze coming, but
that you're getting emotional.
yeah,
I thought
it's,
you're remembering someone, EJ.
I had a sneeze coming, but it's gone now. Okay, but what was I saying? Like you had this sort of routine where you don't really see each other as much, but for at least once, one day of a week, you get to spend time with each other. I feel like it would make me sad if it keeps falling off after that. Like I said, for a couple for the next few months. They're like, oh, I can't meet up because, uh, like I'm starting, this new job, and it's like really busy. It's gonna be really busy for me in the
Mhm.
next 4 months. I won't be able to meet up. I feel like that would make me sad, to experience. But I feel like I would try to find a way that we could still like not maybe not hang out, but we can still share something. Like maybe I'll bring them like boba or bubble tea, I should say. Sorry,
Yeah.
bubble tea at work. Uh, I guess some people might not know the term boba.
No, yeah, yeah. I like that you mentioned that, because being able to find your ways around that unexpected stuff, right? That just goes back to adaptability, and the whole idea for this topic as well. Because when we think about habits, or when we think about the things that we do to kind of build ourselves up and to improve as individuals, right? There are things that we do repeatedly, these habits that we want to build in order to become better, but sometimes there might be a disruption or some kind of pushback in the midst of these different things, because maybe there's a call for change, right? It's kind of like when you reach your cap off of something. If I can call back to that idea earlier of, like, when you're creatively trying to pursue something, and then you're like, this isn't, I don't feel inspired doing this, or I don't feel, excitement doing this. Maybe that's uh, your mind, like, that opportunity to kind of shift and think of, what can I do beyond this, right? Being able to think of the in that mindset of thinking of what could change, what can we change here? Because I don't know about everybody else who's listening, but I struggle with change in different ways. I like changes that are exciting, that are fun, but then there are also changes where things that you're comfortable with, of course, right? Like when we're comfortable, when we like how things are, sometimes we don't want that to change, right? But
Mhm.
as life happens, right? As life is what it is, just like with these different examples that we've kind of cited so far in the simple, terms, right? Even just changing your work schedule. That's something that's so simple that could drastically change the way that you live your life, like Monday to Friday, or even on the weekends, right?
Mhm.
So being able to think about these different changes, and the attitude, right? The attitude that we have towards them, because feelings about these changes is one thing, right? Feelings about it, but having a separate attitude, how you're going to think about them, that's also another way to kind of, I guess, separate the two. Not that you don't want to dismiss, maybe you're feeling sad about the changes that are happening, maybe you're feeling disappointed, but that there's also another side to it, that okay, maybe I can reframe something here. Has that been something that you've gone through, EJ, where you kind of had to, I guess, shake yourself to realize, like, okay, maybe this is a change moment, that this is something that I just need to embrace, and no matter how significant it may feel or how big it may feel, I need to go through with this. Like, did you have you had a moment like that? It doesn't have to be super recent, but that you could, that comes to mind, and how did you deal with it?
Actually, that brings me back to a couple of days. The experience wasn't a couple of days ago, but the reflection was. The reflection was a couple of days ago, where I came across a question of like, if you went back in time, like what would you change about an experience? You know, like they were like, maybe a painful experience that you would wish didn't no, didn't happen. But like looking back, I don't think I wanted to, like, I want to make any differences to it. Like if I had that opportunity, I wouldn't take it, because like I wouldn't change that experience. Because so okay, so this is no, this is what happened. A couple, I'd say a couple of years back, I went through a time where uh, and this is, I guess, pretty normal for everyone growing up, right? You get to spend less time with your friends. You might not talk to them as much anymore. And over the like uh, I would say only a couple of months. Like I've had friends who just didn't talk to me anymore. I would say even some even like told me like some even told me, oh, I'm gonna be busy, so I won't be able to like to even like message you anymore or talk to you anymore, and uh, like you just have to kind of like put a brave face and say, okay, I understand. Good luck on your good luck on whatever you're going to be doing. And that was a rough adjustment. I would say. That was a rough adjustment for. I would say I felt lost for the first 6 months. Like I felt like lost. I even cried at one point because like I felt, I don't know, I felt so lonely at the time, because it went from uh having to constantly talk to people, like constantly having to talk to like my friends. I wouldn't say it was a chore, but it was like at the time it was like something. Sometimes I would be like, I wish I wish I could get a little bit of a break or something. But like having to actually experience, like, oh, I guess everyone's like really growing up. We don't get to talk as much anymore. Some friends, again, I don't get to talk to at all. I don't get to talk to them at all. It made me like really really sad at the time, and I felt a little bit lost because I didn't know what to do with that time anymore. So yeah, just a little bit of a segue to my maybe younger Kadiwa friends. Like I know you might guys might be living in that now, where you're talking to your friends uh most of the day, right? You're hanging out with them, like even online, like hanging out with them. You're playing video games, watching movies. Like cherish those times, because you never know. Like when you have a lot more responsibilities than you do now, you might not get to do that anymore. So cherish those times. But that's my little segue from it. But yeah, at the time I did feel did feel sad, and it took me having to basically uh like I wouldn't use the word force, but that's kind of like where it's at, where like you know the saying "fake it until you make it." It's kind of like that, where I started out with just uh at the beginning just forcing myself to I know to take up like different things to occupy, like to occupy the time. I would say one of the things that I did was um taking up more duties. First in the district, and then eventually at radio. You
I
know,
don't know about the fake it till you make it, just because
like I
I
don't know
think.
how to describe it. Like I don't, like I said, I don't want to use the term forced, but that's basically what I did. Like I pushed myself. There you go. That's maybe a better term to say it. Like I pushed myself to reach that that sadness, but and go into like action. Like what can I do? Like occupy the time with I know with something else. And at the time, that was the purpose of like me taking up like a lot more things just to occupy my time, so I don't I don't think about the time that I don't get to spend with my friends anymore. And it just became something that I don't know that I enjoy, that I would say has become a routine for me as well. Like where now I've accepted that yeah, we don't get to talk to our friends, like we don't get to talk to our friends as much, but like what they say now, when you do find the time to talk to each other, it's like you didn't spend time apart at all. You just go back to the last conversation you had with them. you know
Well, the reason why I'm going back to that phrase that you mentioned, EJ, is because I've heard that be used a lot. The fake it till you make it, and the way that I kind of have observed it in people, that it seems more like radical acceptance. Like you have to just get yourself to a place to accept what the reality is of that moment.
mm,
And it's not like you're faking anything if you're doing it, right? And like if you're doing things, and if you're really pushing yourself to do more for yourself, or for whatever it is at that moment, right? Because we're talking about being able to do things that um will be helpful to us, that will be beneficial for our lives, and creating these different habits. We don't always feel good about about the way that some of these things feel, right? The way that creating a new habit may feel, it might take us a second to get to that perspective of,
mm,
okay, this is going to be good for me, right? Especially when it comes to things that we've just gotten used to, or things that we've you know just gotten comfortable with. Because when change happens, we're typically not ready for it. We typically don't expect it, right?
mm.
The way that it happens in our lives, we don't usually see it coming. There are changes that we can make for
Yeah.
ourselves actively, right? Of course, like you can make the change, and you don't have to wait for changes to happen. But there are changes that kind of just fall into our laps, and we have to find ways to deal and manage those things. And the best word that comes to mind is really acceptance. Acceptance of what your reality is, of what you've been given, right? Like all of the things that you've been given, whatever the circumstances may be, whatever the situation may be. The one that you gave is between you and your friends, right? For other people, it could be maybe you have to do a shift in your job. That's a very drastic change that would be tough to embrace, right? Especially if maybe there are times where you have that shift in salary, and that can be difficult to kind of cope up with for the first few weeks that you're adjusting, because maybe the shift that you had to make, you're lower than you were before. There's so many different ways that changes kind of happen in our life. But because of being able to seize those opportunities to change, that's really the result as well, also of developing the right habits. Because if we get ourselves into habits that don't lead us to changing, right, that we're just there doing them.
Cope, not really to cope, but to comfort ourselves, right?
I won't even say just comfort ourselves, but it's like there's no intention there. right? There's no intention, there's no end goal or result to the habits that we're trying to push for, right? um, that idea of being a lifelong learner, because at some point the things that we are pursuing right now, the things that we consider as habits, or the things that maybe hobbies that we're doing, there will be a point where you'll reach a cap off. We're just like, this is probably the most that I can get out of this. Maybe I need to find a way to push for more out of it, and find how I can change for the better in other ways. It might not necessarily be in that same avenue that you're pursuing. Like, let's say for me, I can push and push and push for music all I want to, but if there's a point that I reach that cap off, we're like, okay, I think this is it. Maybe I need to start using my energy somewhere else. That's kind of the stuff that we need to think about as well, because if we think about adaptability as always being able to learn in the different circumstances that are dealt with us, that's the way that we can kind of, I guess, always be able to manage our habits, or always be able to have a hold on our habits. Because habit, if you think of it, it's repeated action, right? But
Hmm.
habit without intention, what is that for, right? So I guess that's just the way that I'm processing that idea, as we're, because as we're actively having this conversation, that's how I'm processing it. Because that idea of, you know getting comfortable in the habits that we have, I think that can also be dangerous as well, because sometimes we need to evaluate and look at the things that we're doing, reflect, right? Be self reflecting, and kind of look at what we're doing, and is this something that is beneficial, or am I just keep going at this
Hmm.
without purpose, without intention. You're kind of, at that point, you're kind of just, what is it, the term, like autopilot.
Yeah, you're
And then
just
it's like,
doing it to do it.
yeah,
Like doing it because it's routine, because it's what I know it's what you got used to.
yeah,
You're not really doing it for any purpose. That's like me drawing just to. I do get that's the purpose of drawing. Like you kind of just like sometimes you just draw just to draw something, but like it's basically like that. Like like you're not really trying to refine your skill. You're just what's the term for like just drawing
free
on
drawing, freestyle,
doodling? Is that like
doodling.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're just like like you're bored, you're just like just kind of like
I
drawing
mean,
random
it's fine. Like, I'm not saying doodling is not fine. There are moments where we will have that, right? Where we will just, there are habits that we just do every day, like brushing your teeth. That's not something that you have to be. I mean, you should be intentional and about having good hygiene, right? Like that's something that, I guess, that's what backs it up there in terms of habits with intention. But that's kind of what I'm getting at, is in order to have good in order to have good habits that will result in good change, for us, is to have that intentionality in them, right? Seeking to kind of understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and then that it will also help you deal with changes as they come along too. Because, even though you may have a system, of all the things that you want to be able to do for whatever it is. It could be for a project, it could be for personal goal, it could be for work. You could have your system, and you could have everything. And I feel like I've had so many moments like this where I think I have it, right? You think you have it, you think you have a handle on it, and then something will come and be like, no, you don't. Like, try this. Like, that's just reality, right? And those are the moments where you will really be able to see the skills that you've developed from your good habits be put into action. Like a perfect example that I can say that's related to our faith is, prayer, right? Whenever I would be stressed about something, sometimes the first thing that I would like to do is just just to rant, just to pick up the phone and message someone, just rant to them, just like, oh, this thing happened, blah blah blah, this and that, right? And I
Mhm.
can allow that habit to continue on. But if I don't have that awareness, right, of, you know, what I'm doing, what kind of good habits that I want to, have,
Mhm.
and the habit being to replace it is actually like praying first before you do any of that. Like I'll rant to God, like I'll rant to God all day. I'll rant to him all day long, and it's stuff like that. It's stuff like that where, in order for us to be able to get better at embracing changes and being able to build good habits, is really taking that step all the way back and trying to see, where are you headed, where do you want to be, what is your end goal, what is your intention in the things that you're doing. That's what I always try to do for myself, is to understand the things that I want from my life, because if I don't have an idea of where I want to go, how am I going to know how I will react to all the different situations? Like when change comes in, like I said before, it's you don't expect change. It just comes sometimes. Like there's change that you can act on, but there's change that you have no control over. Like a year ago, I had no control over a lot of things that happened to my family. And I've spoken on it before. I won't necessarily detail it now, but it's happened to plenty of other people too. You can't control when people get sick. You can't control like when you lose things, when you know, there you just have to be able to know where you want to go. And then that's like the first step of being able to kind of accept the changes that are happening around you, because what you'll say to yourself is, at least this is what I've said to myself, is I'm upset about the situation, I'm sad,
Mhm.
I'm heartbroken. You can list all of the feelings about it, but this is the kind of person that I want to be coming out of this. What is that going to look like? What do I have to do to get there? And all of this is stuff that happens in my head, like when I'm encountering a bad situation and there are a bunch of people who are around me, especially people that I care about. How do What kind of person do I want to be in response to that situation? How do I want them to see me as? And that's important for us as well, like when we're carrying our faith, because we want to be able to have the habits that show who we really are.
Mhm.
And in order to have those good habits, and in order to develop those strong habits that we will carry on with us, that will really be good for us, it always goes back to that of knowing why are you doing it? What is that thing for? What is How is that going to change you for the better, right? Lifelong learner, always improving, always striving to do better, and adapting, right? I have a lot of feelings about this, but
I love that I love that you brought up prayer, like, and just, like it's a apt example of like when, let's say when you pray, right? Do you pray just because it's become like a habit? Let's say you pray when you wake up, before you go to sleep, before you eat, you pray. Like, do you, like, those are like, I would say, daily. Yeah, that's the kind of prayers you do. But do you just do it because it's routine, because that's how your parents taught you growing up? Or do you, like, let's say in the morning you wake up, do you pray because you really are thankful for right now, for having another day? Before you eat, do you pray just because you got used to it, or because you're really thankful that you have something to eat for let's say for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, right? Or think, before you go to sleep, do you pray just because it's become a habit, or do you pray because you're thankful for another, you're thankful for another day, and you get to go to sleep again. Like you said, that like there has to be a purpose, a reason, like why you why you do things. I mean, in reflection, because sometimes I get it. Sometimes when something becomes a habit, it might cause us to just do it because it's a habit, right?
Well, some
Uh,
things are also just reactions too. Things are also reactions that just have become a habit because we just allowed ourselves to react that way all the
yeah,
time.
yeah,
And that's like that goes back to that idea earlier of, we have feelings. Like we have feelings when things happen, when
mm-hmm.
things don't go our way. But what's in our control is the kind of habit that we want to create in ourselves of the response.
How we respond, yeah,
Like, how
like
are you going to?
responding instead of reacting, right? Or
I mean,
yes,
you'll still react.
yeah,
I
you,
mean,
you react, you still react, but then what do you do? What do you do about it? It's like getting jump scared. Like sometimes like something jump or someone jumps out of the corner and you're like, oh, okay. Like, oh, it's just you. It's just my friend.
yeah.
And, like there is an initial reaction of like, oh, but then like what do you do? What do you do after that? Right? And that, like you said, that's the habit that you're trying to build, right? Uh, of course, you can't really avoid reacting, especially if something surprises you or that initial impact, right? It might cause a reaction, a sort of reaction, but then what do you do? I know what do you do after that, right? That's the habit that you're trying to build. Oh yeah, sorry. I kind of
No, you're good.
tangent there, but
You're good.
mhm.
Any
but
other thoughts?
this for no, just in terms of since we are talking about developing habits, and I do just want to reiterate that final point we made about knowing why you make these changes in your like your or why you try to build these habits, diba? It's like it's important for you to know why you want to build that habit. Like for you, for you, it's like the response, right? The response to the unexpected changes that might happen. Uh, um, for sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there. But for
It's okay.
for I'm
I
sorry.
have a question. I have a
Oh, go ahead.
question.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, EJ. What would be your advice to someone, like, just given everything that we've talked about a lot of things today, right? It's this topic spans so wide because habits are things that we can pick up easily depending on who your influences are, right? The
Mhm,
things that are around you, may unconsciously pick these things up.
mhm,
And that idea of, you know kind of assessing what you currently have on your plate, your roster, right? What are the things that you're doing, and the old, getting rid of the old and bringing in the new. With that in mind, what advice would you give to someone who is feeling challenged about that idea of creating and breaking habits?
mhm,
Just given that, like, everything that we've talked about today, and even last week, in the topic discussion last week, just combining all of it together, what's your takeaway? What advice would you give someone who's really challenged with this? You're like, they might be listening to us right now, and probably telling us it's a lot easier to say all that than to actually
mhm.
do it. What would your words be to them?
Actually, my answer is kind of related to what you said. The advice that I would give, or it's not really an advice, but it's something that I wish to if someone's listening to us and you're struggling with let's say breaking those old habits, those maybe not so good habits that you have, is to be kind to yourself, because it's harder to this is just from my personal experience. It's harder to make those changes if you're not kind with yourself, diba? If you reprimand yourself for falling into like an old habit that you wanted to change, if you're like, oh, I would say something that I know, something that I've said to myself in the past is that I can't, like, oh, you can't change because you say you're gonna change this habit, diba? But you still you still fall to the old habits, right? Like I wasn't kind with myself with with that statement, and it made it a whole lot harder to break that old habit, you know. So if anything, I would say, because I'm sure you'll figure it out. There's nothing, there's not an advice I can give in terms of like how you can solve like your problems. I'm sure you'll figure that out. And I'm sure uh, God will give you that answer eventually, right? You'll find a way to figure it out. But what I can say is, in that process, be kind to yourself, right? Talk to yourself like how you would encourage like a friend who's struggling, right? And if you're, let's say, if your friend comes to you and he's like, I'm really struggling, like making this change, don't you say all of the most encouraging things that you could say, right? Like, say that to yourself. You know, be kind to yourself when you're trying to make these changes. It's a slow process. You know, nobody can make that change in um, like in a couple hours, in a couple days, like even a couple weeks and a couple months. Like you can't really make that change. Like sometimes it takes years even, but in that process, be kind to yourself. And remember the progress that you already made, right? Like look back on the progress you already made, so it's easier for you to say like it's easier for you to be kind to yourself and say like yeah like I really made progress. It helps not only in terms of encouraging you but in lessening, like, because if you're not kind to yourself, what I noticed is that I felt like more discouraged to make the change. This is like, oh, you can't, like you can never change because you say you're gonna change this old habit but you still fall to this old habit, right? um yeah, I feel like I'm just going in a loop now, but but yes, if anything, just be kind to yourself. When you're trying to make a change, it takes time. It takes time. It takes uh, a lot of effort. But you can do it.
Change is not a light switch.
Mhm.
I wish it was, but it's not. Um, for me, I just want to say hello to everyone who's been there in Team Live Chat. Thank you for commenting. I'm sorry we didn't get to your comments, but do appreciate your sharing. I do see some comments there. Thank you, at the Joy Presbytera, for sharing that. That is hard. Loss is always hard. A lot of things are hard. A lot of things are challenging. Change is always challenging. Doesn't matter how many times you've gone through it. Doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what you've experienced in life. It's something that will always be hard. But something that I've just been learning personally is just trying to be open. Open in the sense of not being attached to what I have right now, in that sense of like imagining that it's always going to look this way, or it has to, being too attached to a vision or too attached to it. I have an idea, and I've always said this, that I struggle with that idea of the gap between who I feel that I am and who I want to be.
Mhm.
But being open is something that I've learned through my different experiences, because sometimes there are things that you don't expect to happen, that when it does happen, there are things that you will gain out of that experience that you might not have had any other way but through that experience. So being open to it, not in the sense that you necessarily have to be happy about it right away, but accepting it like with a brave face. Okay, this is what we're doing. I'll hold on. I'll hold on to who I want to be as a person, who I am as a Christian,
Mhm.
and then move. Because if we get too attached to how we think things should be in our heads, our plan is not the plan that gets followed most of the time, more often than not. But what I can say is that when you look back on all the things that you've changed through or all the things that you've gone through, we can appreciate it because we're still here, right?
And you see the
And
purpose, right? The purpose of each the process, of like how it leads you to where you are now, right?
it always does. And I try to remind myself of that whenever, I meet people and I see who they are now, and I try to remind myself like that person is the result of everything that they've been through up until this moment, just as I am as well. And we're all constantly learning. We're all still constantly striving and trying to be better. So to your point, EJ, kindness, right? Kindness with accountability. Keep yourself accountable. Don't baby yourself, but don't be cruel either. But also be open because there are going to be challenges and changes that you may not necessarily like or want, but in a roundabout way later on you'll realize, wow, I didn't realize how that would change my life. I didn't realize that I could end up here. And that's all God. So just being able to let that happen and trust that he's got your back, it's a good feeling. But showing up and doing the work and being firm on who you are as a Christian, that's number one. But then you have to do the work still. So doing the work is those
You have to do it
habits.
half, right? You're half of that. No.
You have to do your part, figure out what those habits are, figure out the ways that you will change for the good. Like where's your mind at? Where's your thought process at? And how is that going to reflect in our actions? And when you feel like you're lost, because there are times that we do feel that way, right? More often than not, that's what we go to God for, right? That's what our prayers are for. That's what our faith is for as Christians. So, for those who have been listening to us, whether you're watching the replay or you're watching live, we thank you. Thank you also for sharing there in the live chat. I'm sorry we didn't get to read everyone's comments, but thank you so much. Go out there and figure out who you want to be as a Christian, and then it'll be really easy to figure out what kind of habits you want to build from that. What to get rid of, what to hold on to. Well, you can clean up. You know, there's always ways to improve. So thank you for your time. Thank you for being with us today, and we hope that this has been a conversation that mattered to you. I've been your host, Tony Rose Valenzuela, broadcasting again from Sterling Heights with my co-host here, EJ, over there in Rockford, Illinois. We'll see you again. We'll see you again, same time next week. Bye bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Have a good weekend.